Elon may be gone, but his spirit lives on. That spirit has a name, Schedule F. Elon lit the fuse. Schedule F is going to see it through. And if you work in government, you probably should be asking, who's next? Because this single document just made 50,000 more government workers disposable. It's all part of a plan known as Schedule F. And in the executive order signed on July 17th, it was officially brought back under a new name, Schedule Policy/Career. So here's what the order says. It creates a new class for career employees in positions of a confidential, policy-determining, policy-making, or policy-advocating character. Translation: if your job helps shape or enforce policy, you can now be put on a special list. And once you're on that list, these positions are accepted from the competitive service rules and regulations for removal. In other words, if you're on this list, the laws that normally protect your job, they don't apply anymore. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a signed executive order dated July 17th, 2025. And it's part of the largest government workforce purge in modern U.S. history. So the question is this a dangerous power grab, or is it exactly what the government needs? Let's start with what the critics are saying, because the backlash to Schedule F has been immediate and intense. Opponents call it a dangerous power grab, a bureaucratic coup that guts job protections for tens of thousands of civil servants who are supposed to operate independently of political pressure. The concern is simple. If you work in a role that touches policy, your job can now be reclassified under Schedule F. And that means the next administration can fire you. No hearings, no due process, no protections. And it's already happening. At the Department of Labor, enforcement of minimum wage and overtime laws for home care workers has quietly been suspended. At the Department of Education and Department of Justice, civil rights enforcement offices have been slashed by nearly half in one case and over 70% of attorneys in the other. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These are the watchdogs, the people who enforce civil rights, labor law, food safety, housing discrimination protections. Without them, entire classes of vulnerable Americans lose recourse. And the agencies we think of as neutral start to mirror the politics of whoever's in charge. But defenders of Schedule F argue that's exactly the point. They say it's about cleaning house, removing embedded ideologues and career bureaucrats who resist change. They argue that the permanent government, what some call the deep state, has grown too powerful, too political, and too insulated from the people actually elected to run the country. And let's be real, whether you love or hate Trump, millions of Americans voted for a government that would take on this fight. Schedule F is one way the administration is making that happen. The official line? That this is all part of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Remember them? A new initiative to streamline agencies, cut waste, and reassert executive control. Think of it like a corporate takeover, but the company being restructured is the federal government. So is this smart reform or political retaliation? Well, here's what's happening. At the DOJ, civil rights enforcement has been gutted. At the Consumer Protection Safety Commission, independent oversight is being replaced by political hires. DEI programs have been defunded. Education and housing discrimination enforcement are disappearing, all under the banner of efficiency.
Tuesday, President Donald Trump signed a series of executive orders eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, government programs, with a memo going out to federal agencies placing all DEI office staffers on paid leave immediately.
The result isn't just fewer employees, it's fewer rules, less oversight, and more power in fewer hands. To some, that's draining the swamp. To others, that's dismantling democracy. So Schedule F, a dangerous purge, or the reboot the system needed? Let me know below what you think. And before I tell you what happened to my friend Byron, here's where things stand right now and where this could go next, because it's already begun. Multiple federal employee unions have filed lawsuits to block Schedule F. Civil service advocates are pushing Congress to intervene, and there's talk of a legislative repeal, though that's unlikely in a divided government. Meanwhile, watchdog groups are tracking the next wave of terminations and preparing legal challenges for each one. But here's the truth. Even if Schedule F gets repealed later, the damage may already be done. And we're already seeing the fallout. One of them, my friend, Byron. I've known him since we were kids. He's spent the last 22 years working in federal transportation logistics, specifically with the Department of Transportation's Emergency Response Supply Chain Unit. His job? Coordinating equipment deliveries during floods, wildfires, and hurricanes. Not political, not controversial, just critical behind-the-scenes work that helped people in crisis. He wasn't a decision maker. He wasn't crafting policy, but in the reshuffling of roles post-executive order, his position was flagged as having policy-adjacent influence. Under the new climate, particularly with agencies using schedule policy, career reclassifications, and RIF guidelines, Byron, at 57 years old, was let go with a probationary termination stamp. No hearing, no misconduct, just cut. He was devastated, not because of the paycheck, but because he was only 8 years from full retirement. Under the federal employee retirement system, that's the difference between $30,000 a year for life, or starting over with partial benefits and uncertainty. The part that really hit, he'd done everything right. He'd shown up, stuck around, and planned for a traditional retirement. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, until it wasn't. Now Byron's in limbo. Not enough time to pivot to a second career. Too much runway to just sit back and collect partial benefits. And like many others, he's asking the same gut-level question. Will my money last? That's the number one fear among retirees. So Byron started exploring outside of conventional retirement planning, not out of desperation, but out of realism. He found a lane, something built for people like him. Decent savings, just no GPS. And before making any moves, he asked the most important question. How much would I actually need to live off of passive income? What he discovered surprised him. It wasn't as much as he thought. And that's what inspired me to make this video for you right here, in case you were wondering how much you'd need to live off of passive income. But for the first time since losing his job, Byron wasn't scared. He's pretty optimistic right now. Turns out maybe the layoff wasn't the end. Maybe it was his beginning. You know, the whole silver lining thing.